Hello, friends. Do you know how most immigrants behave? They arrive in the country and immediately, or at least within a few days, start applying for a residence permit. But alongside these immigrants, who, in my opinion, are acting absolutely correctly, sometimes there are people who come with a somewhat different perspective. Like, we'll live in Montenegro for a month or two, check things out, and then start applying for a residence permit. In my opinion, that's a mistake, because something could happen during those 1 or 2 months. I'm not talking about Montenegro possibly changing the rules or making it harder to get a residence permit. No, obviously, in the foreseeable future, in the next few years, there won't be any changes. But still, sometimes things do happen. To help you understand what I mean, I'll give a specific example. I've actually prepared a few examples here. For instance, the year 2015, for 2 months, the Municipal Migration Office stopped processing residence permits. Why? Because a new law had just been passed, and they simply didn't understand how to work under it. It was quite different from the previous one, but not in terms of requirements, rather in terms of the procedures and workflow. They just didn't understand how to work with it. So it was like this. You would come to the Municipal Migration Office, they'd give you a list of documents and instructions. You'd go with your client and follow all those instructions. A few hours later, you'd come back and they'd say, no, now it has to be done differently. We had a meeting and decided it should be done in a completely new way. They'd give you a new set of instructions. You'd come back the next day and they'd say, no, that's not right either. This went on for 2 months. It's not that they were being difficult or deliberately trying to make our lives harder. They genuinely didn't know how to do their jobs. Literally, every few hours, new instructions would come in. They just sat there, racking their brains over it. And what happened next? So I meet up towards the end of this 2-month period, or actually not even towards the end, it had already finished, MUP had started working. I meet with some Ukrainians, they tell me a story. Before all of this happened, they had already been living in Montenegro for a month. And then on top of that, there were another 2 months when the MUP wasn't working. As a result, in 2 days, their 90 days will be up. And Ukrainians are only allowed to stay in Montenegro for 90 days, after which they have to leave the country. They ask me, what should we do? I say, well, what can you do? You have to leave. You're only allowed to stay here for 90 days within a 6-month period. Leave. And after 90 days, you can come back and apply. We'll help you get a residence permit. There's nothing else I can do to help. And all of this happened just because they spent an extra month sitting around and waiting for things to change. If they had started the residence permit process right when they arrived, they would have made it in time. Both of them would have gotten it. The family consisted of 2 people and everything would have been great for them. But instead, they had to leave after 90 days. That's extra hassle and extra expenses. Let's continue with more examples. Now, there's also the quarantine situation. Many were late. It's not only about those kept out. Of course, there are a lot more of those. But there are also a certain number of people who came here, spent a month living here, checking things out, sniffing around. As a result, they didn't manage to apply for a residence permit in time. Now they're just sitting and waiting for something to happen. First of all, these people don't have access to free medical care because they didn't get their residence permit. In other words, they didn't open a company, didn't get the residence permit through a company, which would have given them free medical care. They don't have it. God forbid they get sick now. Treatment would cost them quite a bit of money. And since, as you know, we are in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, the risk of getting sick is higher. Secondly, it's good if people are living in Herceg-Novi. Here, at least, they can get their child into school. But if they settle somewhere in Budva, it's a complete mess there. That is, until you get a residence permit, you can't enroll your child in school in Budva. So the problem isn't just that they waited for some time instead of coming right away and starting the residence permit process. Next example. I have clients who have been living here since around the end of November or the beginning of December, I don't remember exactly. And they wanted to start setting up a company and applying for a residence permit accordingly after the new year. As a result, they managed to get the residence permit but didn't have time to arrange free medical coverage. We were literally just a few days short. So basically they got their cards, but the bookstores were closed. In other words, it was simply impossible to buy that very booklet form, and accordingly, the tax office was closed as well. All of this is done through the tax office. In short, these people, yes, they have a residence permit, but no free healthcare. God forbid they get sick again, their expenses will be much higher. All of this happened simply because they spent the whole of December waiting for January to come before starting to apply for their residence permit, even though they could have started the process right after arriving. And at this point, they would already have the complete set of documents. There you go. Now, the last example I've prepared for today. Last summer, people split into 2 categories. The first group sent me a power of attorney to open a company and for notification before they arrived. So by the time they arrived around July or August, he had already taken care of everything for them. I opened the company and completed the nostrification process. They arrived and we immediately started working on their residence permit application. There were people who said, no, I don't want to send the power of attorney from my home country. I want to come in person, shake your hand, go with you to notarize the documents myself and hand you the money personally. And from my home country, I won't do any of that. So what happened in the end? The Ministry of Education went on vacation in full. That is, they weren't working. As a result, it was impossible to get the confirmation of nostrification, stating that the documents for nostrification had been submitted, which is required for obtaining a residence permit. As a result, because people didn't do everything earlier when they had the opportunity, meaning they could have just sent a power of attorney from their home country and that could have been it. Because they didn't do this in time, they sat here and waited for the Ministry of Education to return from vacation. So essentially, until September, we didn't do any work with them. That is, we submitted the documents to open the company, and that was it. And we waited for the Ministry of Education staff to return from their vacation. So once again, I want to say that there's really no point in causing these kinds of delays on your own initiative. It's logical. You arrive in Montenegro and immediately start the paperwork. But for those who come during the summer months, that is June, July, August, part of the work needs to be done before arriving in Montenegro. In other words, you need to open the company and submit the documents for nostrification while you are still in your home country. That's all from me. Thank you all for your attention and goodbye.